as you're starting to see much more disruptive capability, things that allow much smaller businesses to engage in and execute, that's the future. So I believe spend a penny in prediction before you spend $100 on media.
Are you giving away secrets to talk about how you would build the prediction?
Well, the way I go about building a prediction model, I want to cover just for the point of this seminar, cover some very core pieces. No matter what size business you are, every business has sales data in some form. Look at that sales data and make sure you get your hands on it. It's a challenge for an agency to get their hands on sales data, but certainly for the client themselves or any kind of small business, it should be accessible. And there's enough free information online to look at population counts, the types of people that are living in, even down to neighborhoods, and to be able to normalize that sales data in a way that allows you to look at sales density. So a lot of people don't understand density. If you can think of it as thick orange juice with pulp and the very watery kind of cheap orange juice. And most people want the thicker orange juice, but there's trade-offs in specifically cost, right? Well, think of your sales data. Where you're selling looks a lot like a heat map. Looks a lot like what I would call chicken soup. There's thick areas, and then there's definitely watery areas. And it depends on the goals of your company. You want to go after the thicker areas. You might want the carrots. Now, to make it actionable on the prediction side, there's a lot of media data that you can convert into density data, and you absolutely should. You should absolutely get everything you can put your hands on and try to quantify media density. And one very basic thing you could do is just look at whatever you're doing inside of Google and count the impressions per city or state. Are you really putting impressions where your sales density is? A lot of clients don't. The classic example, they'll spend $1 million in Wyoming and they'll have no customers. Why? Yeah. Why did you do that?
The one lesson then to kind of take away then here is you got to look at what you've been doing in the past and ask yourself, how well is your media buy just aligned up to what has come through the door? I mean, is that fair to characterize it, Chris?
I would.
Okay.
Think of your business as a boat. You have 3 components to driving boats successfully. You have past data. You need to know how things like gas, how much gas you've consumed, how far you are away from the dock, how far are you away from the destination. Plenty things that you can consume as past data. Data that's mappable, but largely is things that occurred. Your accounting system is data of the past. It really does not predict the future. Certainly if we would have looked at Apple's accounting system in 1999, it could not have predicted today, right? So obviously you need something that relays to real-time in the future. Real-time data, that's a unique area in itself, but you need things that predict the future, things that are forward-looking things that allow you to get insight on the customer, but then you need to normalize these things, in my opinion, in terms of densities, in terms of being able to marry them to the data of the past. So an example, if I see running shoes sold per person per zip code, low cholesterol per person per zip code, and I see leafy area density in a particular zip code, that's giving me an indication of what might happen in the future. I don't think this is a good place to sell fried chicken and open up fried chicken stands.
So if I were KFC, I might not want to do a lot of outdoor advertising in that area.
I don't think it's going to work because the trends, if you would look at the trends over time, that's an indication like, wait a minute, running shoes sold, an increased amount of running shoes sold in this particular zip code with a given population, there's a trend that's taking place, but what is that predicting if I see a lot of running shoes? Is it just mean that people are now just wearing casual clothes, or is it meaning that they're possibly exercising more? And what do I predict happens if people are exercising more? They gain weight or they lose weight? Does it mean they live longer? There's all kinds of things that you can predict and test based on understanding some indicators of the future.
So to think about this in terms of, and I think this is going to apply primarily to like consumer products. The consumer, and Troy, I definitely would want you to weigh in on this. The consumer product mantra of marketing kind of goes like this in my evaluation. We have some pot of money, and we can sprinkle that pot of money out there. And, if we had more money, then we'd have even more awareness. But we can't change that in the short run. So we're going to start with this with this pile of money, and we're going to just try to get as many people under the sun to have heard of us. And it seems Chris's model is, well, okay, first, you should take a look at what the terrain looks like. Figure out who's going to be most susceptible to your message to begin with. And let's say, we were talking about KFC. So clearly, things like outdoor advertising and, freestanding inserts and things like that in these areas that may be very difficult to influence. You might want to look at that versus the normal approach, it would seem to me, which is just blanket everywhere. If I think about McDonald's or whatnot, Troy, an account that you've worked, they seem to just have their ads everywhere. And so the belief that CPGs, I think, develop is if I just had, McDonald's money, $1.4 billion of ad spend, all my problems would be solved. Chris is saying, really, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's just really how much you're going to waste.
Compared to trying to water a golf course. Now, if you've got all the money in the world, you can water the entire property. It's all perfectly green and have an Augusta National kind of appearance on your golf course. But if you don't have that kind of money, you only water the greens and the fairways. And then when the drought comes, now you're only watering the greens and you're letting the fairways go. It comes down to, how much money you have, but also where's your priority? How much is it going to cost you to rebuild that green versus how much it's going to cost to rebuild the fairway or the rough? The rough will grow back. It'll come back. Grass always comes back when the rain comes again. But those manufactured areas of the golf course have to be maintained, just like a business. It has to be maintained. Otherwise, you're going to lose the whole golf course. And I think that, more money is always great, but you also have to think about, like Chris says, where are your priorities? And where can you actually affect change with the money you have? Where it's on the green, right? You got to save the green because that's your core customer.
Water the whole course. Or what I see a lot in the digital space is, we only have so much budget. We can't do Augusta, so let's just sprinkle a little. Let's just sprinkle and thin out the water everywhere because I don't want to make that hard decision, greens versus fairways versus everything else. I will just take my one bucket and just spread it thin. And we all know what that results in.
You end up with a dead golf course and a dead brand because, we've all encountered brands where they, and clients where they just want to spray it around and because they don't want to make the hard decision. And I think that's one of the real dangers. I've encountered that many, many times over the years. And every time we've always, as an agency even, has recommended, look, pick a media you can dominate and dominate that media. Maybe your competition's outspending you on TV 1,000 to 1. Well, then maybe you should just do outdoor and try and dominate the outdoor so that people kind of start to connect who you are and what you are, and without having to spend the big money on TV. There's lots of ways to use your money smarter rather than just blowing the water bill and just dumping thousands of gallons on there.
It would seem, guys, though, that to make this work, right? So, your budget's fixed, and you're basically the takeaway that we're trying to suggest to CMOs is, okay, if you make the decision to just try to spread the butter thinner on the toast, you're not gonna like the result. So you need to then concentrate in a couple of key buckets around who you believe, I would argue, given all the discussions we've had, is really your most profitable customer. Do we agree on that? To concentrate your attack on who you think is going to be your most profitable customer.
What if your most profitable customer is the customer you don't have yet? That's a scary proposition for the CMO. It's like my most profitable customer is the one I need to get, not the ones I have. I'm trying to change my business. I'm trying to change my brand to an upscale brand. And I'm like, I need to spend money to go get these new people, but I can't possibly give up the ones I have.
Well, let's talk about that because I was going to marry that to the discussion we were having previously about the heat maps and the emotions and things like that. The decision about where you're going to concentrate your force is predicated in large part by, Chris's thought is, well, what does your data tell you? And what kind of predictions or hypotheses can you make as a result of analysis of that data? And that's a complicated process. There's a couple of scary things that potentially we're suggesting. The first is that the real work to be done here is not to figure out how much to spend, but where to spend it. We're advocating where you should spend it is in order to influence the highest value lifetime customers. And the final thing what we're suggesting is how you're going to influence them is largely predicated on trying to figure out where they're most susceptible to your message. Because, Troy, your notion of, well, if they're on TV, then maybe you should dominate print or dominate outdoor. I would argue, and Chris, I'd be interested in your thoughts here, I would argue that what alternative media then you might choose is going to be predicated on your belief about where their emotional heat map is going to allow you to influence that highest density concentration.
Oh, very true. There's a lot of, for instance, right now, ad networks spend a lot of their clients' money on sites like Answers.com, eHow.com. These are sites that every one of us finds our way to, but I would say that our happiness is not very large when we're on that site. When you're watching the Super Bowl, you're pretty happy, you're pretty focused, intense, like Troy said, susceptible. You see a lot of cases where, certainly in the digital world, where there's places that you're just not susceptible to being, or your opinion being changed. So you can put a particular brand on the wrong type of media site, on the wrong type of publisher, the wrong type of ad unit. And it happens all day long.
Chris, that's just another level of complexity on why it's so hard, is that now you're talking about context. So yeah. I'm the same person on Saturday night when I'm out at a blues club listening to blues music, and I'm the same person on Sunday morning when I'm in church, listening to some sermon. So
it depends what I'm trying to sell you.
Right? Like, it depends. If you're trying to sell me a drink.
So Jim Beam shouldn't advertise in church?
Exactly.
Probably not. But I mean, yeah, sure, that's an extreme example, but like, context is very important, especially when you're hopping around on the internet all day, and the context of this site versus the context of that site.
There's just a whole bunch of sites that you're just not valuable, and I'm going to ignore you.
Yeah,
it's just not you're there, you're cheap.
Trying to sell me Valentine candy while I'm looking at an automotive parts website is a waste of space.
Doesn't work. Does not work. And
yes, I need to buy Valentine's candy. Yeah, I need to buy that, but not right now. I'm busy looking at auto parts. So stop interrupting what I'm interested in and be interesting. That would be a big help.
And here's the thing. This is what we talked about earlier. The data is starting to become available. There are companies, there are places that you can get this data. You can determine this before you can spend the penny of prediction before you spend the $100 in media.
Chris, why don't you send us that and we'll put it up as a resource at the end of the webinar.